Okay. Welcome everyone to Journey Through the Books of the Prophets. We're on chapter 15 of the second book of Kings. Tonight we're going to introduce some very, very major events in Jewish history. So hopefully we'll get through a lot of material. We're starting on chapter 15. And here again, just like chapter 14 is one king after the other. Either his servants are killing him, either his children are killing the king, a whole string of kings. All the northern kingdom kings were evil. The southern kingdom of Yehuda, some were good, some were not good. So that's what we're picking up on chapter 15. And here we have, though, one of the righteous kings of Yehuda, and his name is Amaziah. And he ruled for 52 years, which compared to many of the other ones, that is quite a long time. Excuse me. And it says he's in Yehuda, and it says that he was a righteous king. He followed in the footsteps of David. And then it says he did everything good, but, and this is a recurrent theme of the good kings of the southern kingdom. We haven't emphasized it, but 3, 4, 5 times it mentions with the good kings that they followed the Torah, they followed Hashem, but they did not remove the altars and burning incense on all of the different mountains of Israel. Every one of them did not do that. Question is why and what was wrong with it? So first of all, as we know from the Torah, is once the temple is built, then all sacrifices had to happen in the temple. Before the temple, there was a concept of a person building their own altar and, in a certain sense, serving God more individually. But once the temple is built, and the temple is built during all of these chapters that we're reading, but the commentaries say that the people were doing it l'shem shamayim. They thought it was good. They thought it was okay. And it was just almost like a universal practice. And so the kings, even though they were good kings and they followed the Torah, they didn't feel that they had the strength to uproot this from Israel. So that's mentioned with this king as well. And then the next verse says that, and again, it points out that he was considered a very righteous king. He ruled for 52 years. But then it says that God afflicted him with tzara'at, with this skin disease, until the day of his death. And he lived in practical isolation because he had tzara'at. But it doesn't explain why God afflicted him with tzara'at. And so as we've seen, and many people have pointed out, to get the full story of the books of Kings, you really have to also look at the book of Chronicles, because the book of Chronicles fills in a lot of things between the lines in the book of Kings that are not written explicitly. And so there in the book of Chronicles, you'll pardon me, I forgot to write down the exact source. It says that this king, in his zeal to serve God, he wanted to burn the incense in the temple. Problem was it's not permitted for him to do this. But in his zeal, he really wanted to, and the Kohanim, in a sense, warned him that this was not acceptable. But he went ahead and did it anyways, and that is what's between the lines here. That, according to the Book of Chronicles, is why he was afflicted with tzara'at. But again, it doesn't take away all of his other good deeds, but he made a big, call it, mistake here, and in a certain way, he paid for it. Okay, now we continue, more northern kings, more southern kings. And I just want to share a thought that I had, which is, it's just quite interesting. I didn't really have time to really develop it. But here, for a couple of chapters now, we see the theme is this king ruled and he died. And then his son took over and he ruled and he died. And the next one came and half of them were killed by other people. And this one ruled and he died. And I was just thinking, as I was reading and preparing, this is very similar to the book, to the passage in Genesis, Parshat Vayishlach, where we had the 8 kings that ruled in Edom before there was a king in Israel. Now, I'm not making an exact correlation here, but nonetheless, there it was the same thing. They named the king. Sometimes they named the king from where he lived, which it does here also. And he ruled and he died. And then whoever took his place, and he ruled and he died. 7 in a row, 7 kings in a row. Only the 8th king does it mention the name of his wife, and that it doesn't mention that he died. So we're told that mystically, it's a very big matter in the Zohar and the Arizal, that this is symbolically the idea of the breaking of the vessels. Each one of these kings who ruled and died is one of the sfirot that broke in the world of Tohu. But the 8th king, his name was Hadar, and his wife was Mehetavel. Because she is mentioned, because his wife is mentioned, it represents a state of rectification. And that's why it says he didn't die. Again, it's all very symbolic, but I just have to say the last week and this week, and I didn't even go through many of them because there's so many names, and some of them ruled for very short, and almost all of them were evil. But I thought it was quite interesting. The same thing, none of the wives are mentioned here. Every once in a while, one of the good kings, their mother is mentioned, and the name of the mother, but never the wife. And so there is some kind of a correlation here, because here we see these are all evil kings, and this is all part of the breaking of the vessels, which eventually will lead at the end of the book of Kings, which we'll reach in a couple of weeks, the destruction of the temple. So the destruction of the temple symbolically is like the breaking of the vessels. So we're continuing in chapter 15. And here we have the beginning of a very, very important episode in Jewish history. And this is that the king of Ashur, of Assyria, so he comes against the northern kingdom, and the king at the time, Menachem, so he tried to buy off the king of Assyria. And he he exacted a levy, a tax on all the people of 50 shekels of silver. And he paid the king of Ashur not to attack. And he took the money and he didn't attack. But of course, it's not going to last long. And so here, now Menachem has died, and his son is now ruling. Again, he did evil in the sight of God. He did, and here's another verse that I haven't pointed out. Each one of these evil kings, it says he did not depart from the evil that Yeruvam did. Yeruvam, if you remember, was the first king of the northern kingdom. And God wanted him to be a righteous king. And even the prophet, Achiav Shiloni, in a certain way, in God's name, made him king. And he turned against God and against the Torah. And every king that followed in his way. And the text points that out. I haven't emphasized that, but here I'm just taking the opportunity that each one of these evil kings, it said he did evil in the eyes of God, and he didn't change his ways from the ways of Yeruvam, the first king of the northern kingdom. And then the king of Ashur. Now, it's not clear the chronology here because here is a different name of the previous one who was paid off not to attack. Now they also have a new king. His name was Tiglath-Pileser, and he came to the northern part of Israel. And here it says that he attacked in Kadesh, Chazor, Gilad, the Galil, the Galilee, the land of Naphtali, which is also up in the Galilee, and he carried them off in captivity. Now, this begins the very, very traumatic event in Jewish history, that this is the beginning of the exile of the 10 tribes. We're going to see shortly that it didn't happen at one time. There were 2 waves. But right here it describes that in the first wave, that the king of Ashur took away people from all these different cities and areas that he conquered. So this begins the exile of the 10 tribes. We'll talk about it a little bit more in the second wave, which is coming up. But he didn't take everyone. So there still is a northern kingdom, and there still are kings, and there continue to be evil kings. And here also in the southern kingdom, we have more righteous kings. But again, it mentions that the high places were not removed, and the people continued to sacrifice and burn incense on these altars. So again, all of the good kings of the southern kingdom just felt they just didn't have the strength, because it was so rooted in the people. But the commentaries point out that they were doing it what they considered for the sake of heaven, l'shem shamayim. Now we're in the 16th chapter. And again, here we have, now it's talking about the southern kingdom. And the new king is Ahaz. He's after like 3 or 4 or 5 other kings, just one after the other. But I'm mentioning it here. He reigned for 16 years, and he was among the kings of the southern kingdom who also was considered an evil king. He did not follow the Torah. He did not follow the mitzvot. But why it's important to mention him, because soon we're going to get to his son, one of the most important people in the whole book of Kings, which is Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu is the son of Achaz. And again, Achaz in the southern kingdom was an evil king. And then what happens is now another enemy, Aram. We've dealt with Aram before in the northern part of Israel. So now he comes against Israel, and he comes against the southern kingdom as well. And so Achaz, Aram, and Assyria are very geographically very close to each other. And many times they work in partnership. And so Achaz, so he takes all of the treasury of the temple, and again he tries to buy off these kingdoms from attacking. So, I mean, truthfully, it's very similar to modern politics. I could say without getting into politics, but right now, America has a whole fleet of ships surrounding Iran, and yet they're negotiating also. So in the end, it's not clear that America is going to attack Iran. Maybe yes, maybe no. And the negotiations is like, if you do what I tell you to do, we won't attack. Not clear that that's going to happen. I'm only throwing that in so we could get some contemporary understanding of what's happening here. Because here we've seen for the second or third time, we're going to see it again, of Israel trying to buy off enemies from attacking. And each time they give them huge amounts of gold and silver, and it usually works, but only temporarily. In the end, they always come back and attack. So this is what's happening again here. And so here is a strange thing. Achaz, he goes to Damascus because he's bought off Ashur and Aram. And he goes to Damascus, and there he sees that the king of Damascus has this very elaborate altar to his gods. And so Achaz, because he is an evil king, so he got very turned on to this altar. And when he came back to Yerushalayim, he ordered Uriah the priest to make a second altar and to offer offerings up on it. So here you see to the depths that they had fallen. He goes and he sees a foreign altar to a foreign god, and he likes the aesthetics, and so he imports it into the temple. And not only that, if you remember in the story of Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, that he built this huge, it was called the Yam, it was like this miniature lake, because remember, everything in the temple was a miniature, was a microcosm of the macrocosm. And he had this elaborate call it a holding tank, and it had elaborate oxen that it was sitting on. But here it says Ahaz removed the whole thing, took it apart, and just made all of these changes. And then in the northern kingdom, and I know it's hard to keep track, and I'm skipping most of the names and the lineage. It's very hard to keep track here. But now there's a new king in the north, Hoshea. And again, the king of Assyria is about to attack. But a lot of times they just bring their armies to force the area they want to conquer, to pay them off. And they walk off with all of these riches. So it's happening again. But we have to remember that Assyria already exiled some of the tribes, or parts of the tribes. So now the king is Shoman Esser, and they try to buy him off, but it doesn't really work. He comes back, and this is the second stage. This is the stage we talk about, that Assyria came. It's approximately 720 BCE, around halfway through the over 400 years that the temple stood. The first temple stood for 410 years, and it's around halfway through. And this time, they carried away the 10 tribes. And it says that they placed them, and there's a whole series of names that we don't really know where they are. And of course, this is the very traumatic event in Jewish history, that 10 of the 12 tribes are taken away. It says here specifically that only Yehuda was left, but it was really Yehuda and Binyamin, and it was most of the Kohanim and the Leviim who were in the southern kingdom, and there were remnants. Many people make the mistake that literally every single person of the 10 tribes was taken into exile. There was a remnant that had escaped to the southern kingdom, or had at some point intermarried with someone in the southern kingdom. So there were remnants of the 10 tribes in the southern kingdom, but it was most definitely primarily Yehuda and Binyamin, and mostly Yehuda. And that's why in the first time that the word Yehudi is used is in the book of Esther. And Mordechai is called Mordechai HaYehudi. Yehudi comes from the word Yehuda. And so by that point, because the 10 tribes have been taken away, and the southern tribes of Yehuda and Binyamin in most measure had been taken off to Babylonia, there were virtually no Jews left in Israel, that what remained of the Jewish people, we were started to be called Yehudim, Jews, to this day. So there is actually a discussion in the Gemara will the 10 tribes ever return? There are opinions that no, they will never return as the 10 tribes. Others hold out the hope that they will return someday. But either way, and this I'm only going to mention briefly. There's a lot of information about this. People can look it up for themselves. But throughout the world, there are different tribes that maintained a tradition that they were originally from the 10 tribes. And so here, just a few examples. Ethiopian Jewry. They believed that they were from the tribe of Dan. And it's a corner of India that relates with Burma. There is a tribe, and to this day they're called the B'nai Menashe. And many of them have converted and moved to Israel. And they have a tradition, they are from Menashe. Now, one of the most interesting ones is that in Afghanistan, like many of the countries in Central Asia, are made up of many, many different tribes, going way back in history. And one of the tribes is the Pathans. The Pathans are around 25 million strong. They are fundamental, I'll even say fanatic, followers of Islam. A lot of terrorism that has happened in the world is coming from these fundamental Islamics. Nonetheless, they have a tradition, and they don't hide it, that they have a tradition. They're from the 10 tribes, which is it's quite paradoxical. And apparently they have a few customs that are very, very close to Torah customs, and many of their names are similar to the names of the tribes, like Ruveni and Shimoni, etc. I'm not an expert in this, but anyone can look this up. More than that, there are, in a looser fashion, different peoples in different countries who claim or have traditions that they're not Jewish now, and most of them are very far from it, but they have traditions that they actually come from the 10 tribes, spread out literally all over the place. Then you have examples like in Spain. Now, this is a more recent thing, where because of what happened in 1492, where Jews were given the choice, either convert or leave Spain and Portugal. Well, many people pretended to convert to Catholicism, but they maintained their Judaism in secret. And then many of these people, because the church really never really accepted them, many of them then left and ended up in the Caribbean, in Mexico, and from Mexico made it to Southwest America, and especially South America. And so here we have, it's not the same, but it's similar, where you have strands of Jews literally spread out all over the place. And at one point, I don't know the exact percentage, but they did genetic testing on Spaniards, and not obviously not Jewish Spaniards, Spaniards today. And again, I don't want to quote the percentage, but virtually all of them had a very high level of Jewish markers, not a small amount, not a very small minority, but very pronounced Jewish markers. And of course, the 10 tribes, even though we don't know where they went, they, of course, intermarried with peoples all over the world. And so today we have a reality of what we'll call sparks of Jewishness in peoples all over the world. Many of them are completely oblivious to it. If they found out, they would probably be horrified. Others, it is we'll call it the secret incentive for people to convert. People who are raised in a completely different tradition, have no connection to Judaism at all, but at a certain point feel themselves completely drawn to Jews, to Israel, to Torah. And it could be because 3 generations ago or 30 generations ago, there was a Jew somewhere in that lineage. So I'm mentioning all this is, of course, a huge subject. Many books have been written about this. There's a lot of information that everyone can access. And I know I'm leaving out a whole lot, but here we're learning it. We're learning the source in the Book of Kings. This is where it's coming from. But the remnants, the sparks of what we're reading about tonight, quite literally has spread all over the world, all over the place. So it's something to really contemplate, and we should all do more research about this. And then at the end of So this is happening already in chapter 17. And then after the expulsion or the taking of the 10 tribes into exile, there is a long this explanation from God. Why did this happen? And it's quite lengthy. I'm just going to recap it. And in short, God says, because they turned away from me, they turned away from the Torah, they turned away from goodness, they did not set up righteous societies, they brought this down upon themselves. And this is something we've discussed many times, the idea of a measure for measure. But here God is spelling it out. And like I said, it's not a short piece here. God is being very, very specific, many examples, a lot of description, but just showing how Israel turned away, worshipped idols, didn't follow the Torah, didn't follow proper morals and ethics. And therefore, that is why the tribes were exiled. And at a certain point, God mentions that the southern kingdom was left because of God's relationship with David. And that is emphasized, that because of God's great love for David and seeing the potential of David and the promises that he made to David, that the southern kingdom, which sometimes was righteous and sometimes was not so righteous. And then what happens is, this is in the 17th chapter, the 24th verse, that the king of Ashur, of Assyria, the land, as it were, is empty now. So he starts bringing other peoples to settle the land. So they'll be able to pay more taxes to him. In other words, if he conquers the land, but there's no one there, then what good is it? So he starts moving all kinds of different peoples from different nations. And what happens is, it says, because they did not fear God, that God sent lions among them, and they started attacking the people. Now, we should know that in ancient Israel, there were a lot of lions. It appears throughout the Tanakh. Even today, there's still a small amount of lions, mostly near En Gedi, back past where most people hike. En Gedi is down by the Dead Sea, but for real, there are still a small remnant of the original type of lions, that they're not like the African lions, but they're indigenous to Israel. So these lions came and began attacking the people. And so it's quite interesting. So the king of Assyria, so his way of solving this is that he found some Kohanim, and he told them, go back, because obviously the God of Israel is displeased. And so I'm not going to have any peace, because this is one of many gods, obviously, in their eyes. So they have to placate the God of Israel. So how are they going to do that? He sent one of the priests back, and he said, teach the people the ways of the land, that God won't be upset anymore. And so it's very interesting, because the commentaries, because it doesn't explicitly say, well, what was he teaching them? But here it says that they learned to have fear and awe of God, the God of Israel, but they continued to worship their own idols. And so the commentaries say, what was he teaching them? The Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 commandments of the children of Noach, which according to Judaism was call it the initial universal religion of 7 commandments that were the basic morals and ethics of how every society, at the very minimum, was to live. Nonetheless, it says that they recognized God as God, but they held on to their other traditions. But here you have, even though it doesn't say explicitly, this is one of the places where you see in the Tanakh this idea of the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach in a later period, way after Noach. L'chaim, everyone. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dbaro. Just give me 1 second here. But then at the end of chapter 17, it's addressing the Jews again, saying, you still are commanded to keep the Torah and to fear only God and to serve only God. This is like in contrast with these people who are being taught the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach, but they can't quite extricate themselves from serving their original gods. So that is the end of chapter 17. And here, we're only going to be able to start the life of Chizkiyahu. I already mentioned him, that he is the son of Achaz, the king of Yehuda. And at the beginning of chapter 18, it says he was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned for 29 years in Yerushalayim. And here, like I mentioned before, it mentions the name of his mother. Her name was Avi, but it doesn't mention his wife. And here it says, now this has been said by many of the kings of the southern kingdom, that they were righteous and they did right in the sight of God. And according to all that David had done, every king in Yehuda is actually, at this point, they're all part of the lineage of David. He is the only king of it. The first king was Shaul. But once David reigned, every one of these kings comes from the lineage of David. But it doesn't mean they were all good kings, as we've seen. But here, when it's talking about Chizkiyahu, so it says that he did according to all that David, his father, David is called his father, even though he's like the great grandson. But he's called his father. And here, he is the first one. The first thing it says is that he removes all of the high places, and he broke down the pillars and the altars. And here it says something. It says that he destroyed the Nachash HaNechoshet, Asher Asa Moshe. If you remember, in the desert, one of the times that Israel complains, fiery serpents came and were biting the people, and they were in danger of dying. These were like poisonous snakes. So God said to Moshe, make a serpent, put it up on like a pole, a staff, and have the people look at the serpent, and if they will do so, they will be healed. Now, this, of course, is a very, very mysterious, paradoxical event that happened here, because it almost sounds like that Moshe make an idol, the figure of a serpent, and have people look at it, and they'll be healed. So the commentators, especially Rashi, explains, again, everything in the written Torah, there's so much between the lines. But the idea was that when people would look up at the serpent, they would actually be looking beyond the serpent and understanding that these serpents came and bit them because of their bitter complaining. And so now, if we appeal to God, we will be healed. That's how it's explained. Nonetheless, on the surface, it's such a seems like a contradiction to so much of this idea of not making images of anything that could be construed as a god. Now, in the Torah, God just says, make a serpent. But here, one of the words for serpent, of course, is the same as snake, nachash. And in Hebrew, the word for copper is nechoshet, but it has the same root as nachash. And so even though God did not command Moshe what to make the snake out of, Moshe made a nachash nechoshet, a copper snake. And it's like a play on words. It's a play on words. So here it says that Chizkiyahu destroyed this copper snake, meaning that for approximately 600 years from the time that Moshe made this, it still existed. It was, I'm not sure where it was kept, but it was still here in Israel. And it says Chizkiyahu, he went beyond any of the other kings, and he destroyed all of the altars, all of the pillars, and there still was some idol worship, even in the southern kingdom. He destroyed everything, including the Nachash Nechoshet, this copper snake. So the question is, why was it still around? Why hadn't people gotten rid of it? So some answer, it was like, well, this is something that Moshe made. How can we get rid of it? It doesn't mean that they were worshiping it, or let's say they put it in the town square and everyone was taking pictures of it, but it still existed. And so one of the answers is, well, this is something that God commanded Moshe to make. How can we destroy it? Others were that this copper snake had a healing power to it. So why should we destroy it? 1 second. Why should we destroy it? But nonetheless, Chizkiyahu felt it was or could be misused. And so he wanted to clean house. He wanted to absolutely get rid of any remnant of idol worship. And it says, again, the descriptions of him are like no other king that we've had. If we go back, even since David, we have not had a king in Israel that the text has applauded and praised in such a way as Chizkiyahu. Now, tonight we're only starting with Chizkiyahu. He will be around for a while. He ruled for 29 years, and there's a lot of the text is about him. So he was a very, very special soul in Israel. And the text continues. We're in the 18th chapter. We're in the 5th verse. It says that he trusted in God. And it says that after him, there was no one like him among all the kings of Yehuda, nor among those that were before him. Meaning he was compared as great as David himself. There's another verse that comes later that it's more implied that he wasn't greater than David. But this verse implies that he was even greater than David. We will see later that there was a hope or anticipation that he would be Mashiach. And that we're going to have to revisit. I'm just putting it out. That's how great this soul of Chizkiyahu was, that there was an anticipation that he could fulfill the role of Mashiach. And again, it says that he held fast to Hashem, and he did not depart from following God, but he kept all of his commandments, which God had commanded to Moshe. So here, again, we see tremendous praise for this personality called Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu, the name comes from the word chazak, that his strength is God. Because he followed the Torah, because he believed in Hashem and trusted Hashem, that is where his strength came from. So that's his name, Chizkiyahu. So now, I'm not sure how far we'll get, but we'll introduce here that this is when Sencherib, if we've noticed, Assyria's had a series of different kings. It might be that they had the same problem, that each one of the kings was killed by their servants, their sons, their rivals, whatever. Here, this is a new king of Assyria, Sencherib. And so here he comes against you. There's nothing left of the northern kingdom. The only kingdom to come against is the southern kingdom. So he now comes against the southern kingdom. And Chizkiyahu basically attempts to do what everyone else has attempted, buy off Sencherib. So he gives him, again, an enormous amount of gold and silver, and he goes away. He even, and this was later, he was rebuked by the sages. He took the doors of the temple, these elaborate doors, and as a way of saying to Ashur, I'm not going to cause you any problem. I'm giving you all of this money and riches. Just stay away. So he gives him not only the treasury of the temple, but even the doors of the temple. And I think we'll stop here, because the story is going to develop, and it's one of the more famous stories, what's about to happen here. And so I don't want to rush through it. So here we are in the middle of the 18th chapter. That's where we will stop for right now.